Good evening, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. The Office of the Prime Minister Gender and Child Affairs observes September as the month to build awareness around foster care and adoption. We previously spoke with team lead on foster care, Angelique Tuwari-Defarge, and it is time to go in depth on adoption with team lead and acting manager for adoption at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, Renee Neptune. Welcome, Renee Neptune. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Dike. Thank you for having me.
And we already spoke with your colleague at the authority, and we would have zoomed in a little more on foster care. So we're very happy to have this discussion specifically on adoption. But with that in mind, we start off with a definition, please. What is adoption?
Okay, no problem. Adoption is the legal transfer of all parental rights and responsibilities from a child's birth parents to the persons who now want to adopt this child, and we call them adopters. So adoption is a permanent process. Once that process is completed, it is granted by the court, and that child's birth certificate will be sealed, and the child will be given a new adoption certificate. So as you all may have heard before, that foster care is temporary, adoption is permanent. Once it is completed, the child earns a permanent place in that family and is able to the inheritance of his or her birth new parents, but the persons who adopted this child.
Now, when you speak of the difference between foster care and adoption, and when we also spoke with Ms. Tuwari-Defarge, she spoke about the difference in duration. So foster care being something that is a lot more temporary versus adoption, which is permanent. You raised the issue of legality. I want you to go in on that a little more, please, in terms of the logistics of that birth certificate, rights and privileges, and even like parental or guardian consent.
Right. So for an adoption to happen, the adoption unit, the Children's Authority, we are heavily guided by the Adoption of Children Act 2000. The Children's Authority is the only body responsible for carrying out an adoption because it is such a legal process, right? So from there, when persons apply to us, we do inform them that it is a legal process, and one of the first things we have to do is to contact the birth parents or seek to find the birth parents of this child that they want to adopt. And this is because for a child to be placed for adoption, that child has to be freed. And what I mean by the child has to be freed is that that child, the parents, they have to be interviewed. We have to find them to get their views and opinions on this because they are the biological parents, and they have to sign the requisite consent forms. When they sign these forms, they relinquish their parental rights. That allows the court to free this child for adoption, so this child can then be matched and placed with a family. Even if it is a child that is already in your care for a number of years, we still do have to get the consent from the birth parents before we can proceed for an adoption. In terms of the birth certificate, you raised that question, and yes, the child's original birth certificate will be sealed by the court, and from there, the child will be given an adoption certificate. So on the certificate, what happens is the persons who adopted this child, their names are going to appear on the certificate as the parents, and by law, the child also has to take their surname, so that surname will be reflected in the birth certificate. Persons usually ask, so on this birth certificate, can I change the child's name? Yes, you can change the child's name if you wish to. The birth certificate, the original one, which is sealed by the court, that can be unsealed by the child should he or she wish to know who his or her birth parents are. And that can happen when the child turns 18.
And you say that, and that blows my mind because I never thought about it. So I'm very glad we're having this conversation. And if someone wants to get more information from the adoption unit, we're also showing the email address for the unit. But you're saying that the first name, is possible to change the first name as well?
Yes, it is. It is. Persons sometimes keep it as a middle name. They give the child a new first name. All those things, that it is possible during the process. Once we know that it's going to reach to the stage, we do engage the prospective adoptive parents in that conversation. And a lot of times they discuss with the child, if the child is of age, about changing their name, their first name. And yeah, it can be done. They inform us, and this information is included in our reports, which goes to the court, so that once the court grants this adoption, that new name is reflected in the child's birth certificate.
And that makes me want to ask about some more information. I'm sure you won't, I'm not asking for specifics, but what are some of those statistics around adoption in Trinidad and Tobago? I'm sure that every situation would be different because different
Yes.
scenarios, different individuals. But what are some of those statistics that you would record and have on adoption in Trinidad and Tobago in a very general sort of way?
Sure. So, upon the Children's Authority being proclaimed in 2015, the adoption unit came under the umbrella of the Children's Authority. So from 2015 to present, we have about 64 adoptions completed thus far, with some obviously being in train for processing by the court. And the unit continues to process cases as they come. And within these 64 adoptions that have been completed thus far, we have both what we call open and closed adoptions. So open adoptions are the ones where there's a child already present, and it's like, let's say, a grandparent wanting to adopt a grandchild and aunt wanting to adopt a niece or nephew. There's an identified child, and they know who the birth parents are. A closed adoption is the one in which there's no identifying relationship, and the authority places a child with these persons. So that those adoptions that have been completed thus far comprises of both open and closed. And recently we have even completed adoptions for a sibling group of up to 4 siblings. So all these things are included in those statistics.
Now, you spoke about open and closed adoption. It makes me, and you also had the issue of consulting with a child with regard to changing their first name. Who are some of those stakeholders in the process of adoption in terms of possibly the prospective adopter, adoptee, and is there anyone else involved?
Yeah, so it starts off with firstly the birth parents. They are the major part of this process because we have to get consent from them. Then there's the prospective adoptee. This is the child who the persons wish to adopt, as well as the prospective adoptive parents. They are all engaged throughout this adoption process. The child, once the child is of age, the unit, our caseworkers, we speak to this child to get their views and opinions on the adoption process. Do you know what is happening? Do you know that these persons want to adopt you? How do you feel about being adopted? All these things are taken into consideration. All these persons, from beginning to end, all these stakeholders are a part of the process.
And it makes me want to ask about consult from the child as well in terms of like speaking with them and asking, do you want this person to adopt you? But that also raises the issue of the range of ages that you find adoption happening within Trinidad and Tobago. So what does that range look like?
A lot of persons want babies, and that is understandable. Everyone wants a child that they can raise and they can nurture. So we may find persons who, in our application form, there's what we call a child profile. Persons could select the age of a child they'd like to have placed with them. And what we've been realizing is a lot of persons, they want babies. We do not have a pool of children readily available for adoption. So what we are urging is that, persons who are considering adoption to also consider wanting to increase your age range of a child that you would like to have placed in your care. Consider opening up your home and a heart to maybe an older child once this child is a candidate for adoption, because like I said, everyone wants babies, but we do not have a pool of children, especially babies, available for adoption.
And do you see, well, someone who's 17, someone who's 16? So by law, if you're looking at it, that range that they'll be in a household is shorter. Do you see adoptions like that happening as much? And what is the process? Or is that on a case-by-case basis as well, with the person saying, okay, well, I'm going to remain in this household for this amount of time?
So yes, we do see persons submitting applications for children who are 16, 17. An adoption has to be completed, and I mean completed the entire process from submitting an application to going to the court, and I'll explain how the process goes shortly. But that child has to be under the age of 18 when that adoption is granted. So what we do also inform persons, once you know that you want to adopt this child, send in your application so that it can be processed in a timely manner. The time frame is sometimes indeterminate.
And right now is a beautiful
And
opportunity to take a
yeah,
short break. Oh, you're back with us now, Renee?
I am.
All right, the timeliness, sorry, you were saying?
Up to where? No, I was just stating that, you
Okay.
know, it's each case, it's indeterminate because it's on a case by case basis. So we don't have a definite time frame, but we do urge persons, if there's a teenager in your home and you want to formalize that arrangement legally with adoption, to come to us as soon as possible so we could inform you of the process and have everything carried out before that child turns 18.
All right, and we take a short break now. We are speaking with the team lead of the adoption unit at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, Renee Neptune. We are going in depth on the issue of adoption. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. We are discussing adoption with team lead for the adoption unit at the Children's Authority, Renee Neptune. And Renee, you were saying that you're going to get into the adoption process shortly. Now is your chance. How does someone go about adopting?
Okay, great. So someone can adopt by submitting an application form to us. That's the first part of the process. But even before doing that, we encourage persons to contact the unit and we will explain the process to you before you submit that application, because when you go through it, you're going to have a lot of questions and we are willing to discuss any concerns that you may have. When you submit that application form to us, and later we'll provide the information on how you can submit it. It is found on our Children's Authority's website at www.ttchildren.org. You submit it to us, and what we have to do is it's going to join a queue, and when we're actioning it, you have to complete a thorough psychosocial investigation. And that comprises of us interviewing you all, interviewing anyone else who lives in the home. You have to submit some documents for us, medicals, financials. We will let you know when to submit these. From there, you have to undergo a background check as well as a psychological assessment. These assessments are not just for the prospective adoptive parents, but also for persons who reside in the home who are 18 and over. So we do ensure that it is a thorough process. We want to ensure that because this is going to be a permanent placement, we want to ensure that the home is safe, that the home, it's child-proof, depending on the age of a child that's going to be placed. We want to ensure that this environment is a safe environment for this child. So we also conduct home visits. All these things make up what we call our home study report. Thereafter, it is, presented to our adoption committee. Our committee will make a decision based on the suitability of the person to adopt a child. And let's say it's approved, you then go on our list of suitable prospective adoptive parents, where you'll be waiting for a child to be matched with you, right? The final stage of the process, or before I even get to that, what we have interaction sessions. So let's say you're matched with a child. You get to meet this child, you get to interact with this child before this child is placed in your care. So we could see a bond developing. It goes on for 10 weeks, and we do see each week the child and the prospective adoptive parent having a bond develop each week as we go along. There's a probationary period for 6 months where we monitor. So we don't just place this child with you and then leave the child there or leave you all there, because this is a big transition. We provide support to you all. Should you require parenting training, should you require therapeutic support, these things are provided by the organization. We can refer you to persons as well. And the final stage of the process is when it goes to the court. You have to retain an attorney for the court hearing, and the court is the one who grants the adoption order. So the Children's Authority makes the recommendation to the court. Should this be a good match? There are no red flags or anything observed, and the court is the one who grants the adoption order. And that is the final stage of the process.
All right, now it seems there are a lot of checks and balances in place, but
Yes.
Is there opportunity for things to fall through the cracks? Because in terms of like that 10-week period where you have the opportunity to start forming that bond, or the 6-month period where you is probationary, what about other individuals in the house? Because you spoke about assessments for individuals who would be 18 and older in the house as well. And also if someone who is there in the house, 18 or older, does not want to submit themselves to that sort of evaluation, what is the recourse for that?
Well, it is mandated by the Adoption of Children Act that all persons who are in the home who are 18 and over, they have to be a part of the process. And this is something that we do inform the prospective adoptive parents upfront. These persons, they don't just have to undergo the psychological assessment and the background checks, but they also have to undergo, we interview them, our caseworkers interview them on a one-on-one basis. We want to find out, okay, are you all aware of what is going on? Are you all supportive of this decision? Are you not? So all these things are taken into account. So we do encourage persons that you also have that familial support, especially from the persons who reside within your home.
And what about younger children below 18, but there have been cases, and I'm speaking one anecdotally, a little bit from experience as well. So you have someone new come into the household, be it adopted or sometimes even a birth child, and you see older siblings start to regress a little bit. Is that looked at during that probationary period?
Yes, it is. Even before the probationary period, when we are doing our reports, that other child in the household, they are also interviewed. Once they are of age, we do ensure that they are also a part of the process and they are aware of what is going on. And this is not going to be a surprise to them because, like you said, yes, they may regress in terms of their behaviors. There's another child to share the attention with mommy and daddy. So yes, that child is also taken into consideration. They're also spoken to, their thoughts, their views on the adoption is also taken into consideration. And if we or the prospective adoptive parents feel like, okay, they may need some therapeutic support for this child, any therapeutic intervention, that is also an option. All these stakeholders are taken into consideration.
All right, so we have just under 2 minutes now, but I read and spell for me. What do you mean when you say of age? So if the child is of age?
So let's say the age of understanding, it can start from the age of 7 and up, but you know how children are these days, they understand from much younger. So once we try to explain as best as possible in child-friendly language, this is what is going on. Tell me what you understand by this, and we gauge from there.
And is there a process, or is that process a little different when you're moving from, or the possibility of moving from foster care to adoption? So what is the lay of the land there?
Right. So we do not have much cases, or I should say any cases really like that, because foster care is really for the intention, it's a temporary placement with the intention of a child being reintegrated with their family members, with the hopes of that, because we try as best as possible to not break up families, even for adoption, when persons may come in and suggest, okay, I'm unable to care for my child. The first thing that we ask is, are there any family members who may be willing and able to support you? So the move from foster care to adoption is not something that happens just like that, or that is really practiced. And we do also say, even not just for children, but for foster parents, to not to use the foster care process as a way to circumvent the adoption process. So persons who are probably interested in becoming foster parents, just note that this child who you may be caring for is not really considered a child for adoption. However, you are able and you are free to submit an application to us to adopt a child.
And I want to thank you for raising that point in terms of trying to keep families together, because the family being the cornerstone of society.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you for the work that you are doing, you and the unit. Renee Neptune, team lead of the adoption unit at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And we want to thank you for tuning in to In Depth with me, Dike Rostant, on behalf of the entire TTT News team. Thank you for joining us.